The August heat rolled across the Nevada desert like a living thing, and Quinn Tanner stood in the doorway of the small ranch house outside Elko with his hat in his hands, watching the woman inside try to pretend she wasn't crying. Her name was Diana Blake, and 3 days ago she had buried her husband after a rattlesnake bite turned his leg black and took him in less than 48 hours. The ranch hands had scattered to other outfits the moment Tom Blake stopped breathing, leaving Diana alone with 2,000 acres of scrubland, 30 head of cattle, and a mortgage payment due in 6 weeks that might as well have been $6 million. Quinn had ridden with Tom for 2 years down in Arizona territory before Tom married Diana and moved north to try his hand at ranching. When word reached Quinn about Tom's death, he had saddled his horse and ridden 3 days straight to get here. Now he stood on the threshold of a house that smelled like lavender and grief, and he had no idea what to say. Diana turned from the stove where she had been boiling coffee that neither of them wanted. She was 24 years old, with dark auburn hair pulled back in a simple braid and eyes the color of creek water in summer. Her dress was black and hung loose on a frame that had lost weight in the past week. "You should not have come all this way, Mr. Tanner. I appreciate the kindness, but I will manage." "How?" Quinn asked. The word came out harder than he intended, and he saw her flinch. He was 26, tall and rangy, with dark hair that needed cutting and a face that had seen too much sun. "Tom told me about the mortgage. Told me the cattle were barely holding their own on this land. How are you going to manage alone?" She poured coffee into 2 tin cups with hands that shook just slightly. "I will find a way. Perhaps I can sell some of the herd. Perhaps I can take in laundry from town. Women have managed worse than this." Quinn took the cup she offered and set it down on the rough wooden table without drinking. "I am staying." "You are what?" "I am staying. I will work the ranch until we get it turned around. No pay needed, just food and a roof." Diana stared at him like he had just spoken Chinese. "Mr. Tanner, I cannot ask you to do that. I cannot pay you. I can barely feed myself, and people will talk. You did not ask. I am offering, and people can talk all they want. I will sleep in the barn." He picked up his hat from where he had set it on the table. "I am going to ride the property line and see what we are working with. We can discuss it more when I get back." He walked out before she could argue, his boots loud on the wooden porch. Behind him, he heard the crash of the coffee cup hitting the floor and the sound of Diana Blake finally letting herself sob the way she had needed to since they lowered Tom into the ground. The property was worse than Quinn had feared. The fencing was half rotted. The water situation was desperate with only one good well, and a creek that looked like it might run dry before September ended. And the cattle were scattered across terrain that made gathering them a 2-man job that would take weeks. He rode back to the house as the sun was setting, painting the sky the color of a fresh bruise. Diana had cleaned up the broken cup and composed herself. She had also prepared a meal of beans, salt pork, and cornbread that filled the small kitchen with smells that reminded Quinn of every trail camp he had ever made. They ate in silence for a while, the only sound the scrape of spoons against tin plates and the distant call of a coyote starting its evening hunt. "The fences are bad," Quinn said finally. "I will start there tomorrow. Need to keep the cattle from wandering too far while I figure out how to bring them in closer." Diana set down her spoon. "Mr. Tanner, Quinn, I truly cannot pay you. Even if we sell every head of cattle on this land, after the mortgage there will be nothing left. You would be working for months for nothing. Tom was my friend, best man I ever rode with. He would do the same for me. Tom is dead." Her voice was flat, matter of fact. "And you have your own life to live. This is not your burden." Quinn looked at her across the table. In the lamplight, He could see the exhaustion written in every line of her face, the way she held herself together through pure will. Maybe I am tired of my own life. Maybe I need something to do that matters more than punching cattle for $30 a month and a bedroll. Maybe I just want to help. Does the reason matter? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. Finally, she shook her head. The barn has a loft. There are blankets in the chest by the door. If you are determined to do this foolish thing, at least sleep where the roof does not leak. The barn is fine, Quinn said. He finished his meal and carried his plate to the basin. Thank you for dinner. I will be up before dawn to start on the fences. He walked out into the cooling night and crossed the yard to the barn. The structure was solid enough, built by someone who knew their trade. The loft Deanna mentioned had clean straw and was probably comfortable. Quinn looked at it for a long moment, then looked back at the house, where a single lamp still burned in the window. He spread his bedroll on the barn floor, the hard packed dirt that smelled of horses and hay and old wood. He rolled his saddle bags into a pillow and lay down fully clothed except for his boots. The floor was unyielding beneath his back, and he knew he would wake up stiff and sore. He also knew that Deanna Blake was sleeping in a bed that still smelled like her dead husband, alone in a house that suddenly felt too big, dealing with grief and fear and uncertainty that would have broken most people. The least he could do was be uncomfortable too. He woke before dawn with his back aching and the taste of dust in his mouth. He saddled his horse and rode out to start working on the fence line, carrying a bag of tools and wire that looked like it might have been old when Tom Blake bought the place. The work was hot, tedious, and endless. Every post he fixed revealed two more that needed attention. Every stretch of wire he repaired showed him 10 yards more that had to be replaced entirely. Deanna brought him lunch at midday, riding out on a mare that was too old for ranch work, but still had enough spirit to make the journey. She carried a canteen of water and sandwiches wrapped in cloth. They ate in the shade of a scrub oak that was more wishful thinking than actual shade, not talking much, both too tired for conversation. You are making progress, Deanna said, looking at the fence line. Some. It is going to take weeks to get it all done. You do not have to do this. I know. She looked at him with those creek water eyes, searching for something she could not quite name. Then she gathered the remains of lunch and rode back to the house without another word. That night, Quinn spread his bedroll on the barn floor again. His back complained, and he knew he should just climb up to the loft and sleep somewhere that would not leave him crippled. But he thought about Deanna eating dinner alone in that house, washing dishes alone, sitting alone with her grief and her fears, and the hard floor seemed like the right choice. The days fell into a rhythm. Quinn worked the fences, then moved on to gathering the scattered cattle, then started the dangerous job of breaking a few of the wild horses that Tom had caught but never finished training. Deanna cooked, cleaned, tried to keep the vegetable garden alive in the August heat, and managed the 1,000 small tasks that kept a ranch functioning. They ate meals together, spoke when necessary, and existed in separate orbits that occasionally intersected. 3 weeks in, Deanna found him in the barn after dark, lying on his bedroll on the hard floor. She stood in the doorway with a lamp in her hand. "Why are you sleeping down there?" Quinn sat up, rubbing his eyes. "What?" "The loft. I told you the loft has clean straw and blankets." "Why are you sleeping on the dirt?" He looked at her for a long moment. "The floor is fine." "It is not fine. You are going to ruin your back. I can see you wincing every time you bend over. Get up to the loft." "I am comfortable where I am." Deanna set the lamp down and crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous. You are punishing yourself for no reason." "I am not punishing myself." "Then what are you doing?" Quinn stood up slowly, his back protesting every movement. "I am doing what I can do. That is all." They stared at each other in the lamplight. Finally, Deanna picked up the lamp and walked back to the house without another word. Quinn lay back down on the hard floor and stared at the darkness above him until sleep finally came. September arrived with no relief from the heat. The creek dried to a trickle, and they had to haul water from the well for the cattle twice a day. Quinn worked from before sunrise to after sunset, and Deanna worked just as hard. They moved around each other like dancers who had practiced the same routine for years, anticipating needs, covering gaps, functioning as a unit without consciously trying. One evening, Deanna came out to the barn as Quinn was brushing down his horse. "I need to go into Elko tomorrow," she said. "The general store will extend me credit for supplies if I ask. I need flour, coffee, sugar, some salt if they have it." "I will go with you," Quinn said. "That is not necessary. It is just a quick trip." "When was the last time you left this ranch?" Deanna was quiet for a moment. "Before Tom died." "Then you are due for a change of scenery. We will go together." They left early the next morning, taking the buckboard and driving the 8 miles into Elko as the sun climbed and the heat built. The town was small. Just a few dozen buildings clustered around the railroad tracks that connected it to the larger world. The general store was run by a man named Harper who had known Tom Blake, and who looked at Deanna with the kind of pity that made Quinn want to hit something. "Mrs. Blake," Harper said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I heard about your situation. Terrible thing, just terrible. Now about that credit." "I will pay you back as soon as we sell the cattle," Deanna said. Her voice was steady, but Quinn could see the tension in her shoulders. "Oh, I am sure you will. I am sure you will. But times being what they are, I am afraid I can only extend so much credit without some kind of guarantee. Perhaps if you had something to put up as collateral." Quinn stepped forward. "How much credit are we talking about?" Harper looked him up and down. "And you are a friend of the family. How much?" "Well, for the supplies Mrs. Blake needs, probably $25 worth, but without collateral." Quinn pulled 2 double eagle gold coins from his pocket and set them on the counter. "There is $40. Give her what she needs and put the rest on account for next time." Harper scooped up the coins so fast he almost hurt himself. Of course. Right away. Let me just get those supplies together." Outside, as they loaded the supplies into the buckboard, Deanna turned to Quinn. "You should not have done that. That was your money." "It was just money." "It was not just money. It was probably everything you had." Quinn climbed up onto the buckboard seat. "Then it is a good thing I am working for food and a roof instead of wages. Otherwise I would just waste it all anyway." They rode back to the ranch in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Something had shifted, though neither of them could have said exactly what. That night, Quinn spread his bedroll on the barn floor again. His back was a constant ache now, and he knew Deanna was right about ruining himself. But he also knew that comfort felt wrong somehow, like it would be a betrayal of something he could not name. So he lay down on the hard ground and waited for sleep. October brought cooler temperatures and the first real hope that they might actually save the ranch. The cattle were gathered and the fences were repaired. The horses Quinn had broken would fetch good prices in Elko. They had enough hay put up to get through the winter if it was not too harsh. The mortgage payment was still a looming problem, but it felt more manageable now than it had when Quinn first arrived. They celebrated the progress with a better-than-usual dinner. Deanna had traded eggs for a chicken in town, and she roasted it with the last of the summer vegetables from the garden. They ate at the kitchen table, and for the first time since Quinn had arrived, Deanna smiled. It was a small smile, tentative, like she was not sure she still knew how, but it transformed her face. "We might actually do this," she said. "We might actually save this place." We will do it, Quinn said. No might about it. I could not have done it without you, you know that. You would have found a way. Deanna shook her head. No, I would have lost everything. I would be working in some saloon in Elko right now, or married to some man I did not love just to survive. You saved me. You saved Tom's dream. I do not know how to repay that. You do not have to repay anything. She looked at him across the table, and Quinn saw something in her eyes that he had not seen before, something that made his chest feel tight and his hands unsteady. Why did you really stay, Quinn? And do not tell me it was because of Tom. There is more to it than that. He could have lied. He could have deflected. Instead, he said, because the first time I saw you standing in this kitchen trying not to cry, I knew I could not leave. Because every day I am here, I find more reasons to stay. Because somewhere between fixing fences and hauling water and sleeping on that damned barn floor, I stopped doing this for Tom and started doing it for you. The silence that followed was so complete Quinn could hear his own heartbeat. Deanna stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. For a moment he thought she was going to tell him to leave. Instead, she walked around the table and stood in front of him. The barn floor, she said quietly. You have been sleeping on the floor for 2 months. About that. Why? Because you are hurting. Because you lost someone you loved and you are scared and alone. Because I could not make any of that better, but I could at least share some of the discomfort. It is a stupid reason. Deanna reached out and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his sun-weathered skin. It is the most beautiful, stupid reason I have ever heard. Then she kissed him, soft and tentative and tasting of chicken and hope. Quinn stood up, his chair falling backward, and pulled her close. The kiss deepened, 2 months of unspoken feelings pouring out in a moment. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I loved Tom, Deanna said. I want you to know that. I loved him and I miss him and I will always miss him. I know. But he is gone and you are here. And I think I am falling in love with you, and I do not know if that makes me a terrible person or just a person who is trying to keep living. Quinn cupped her face in his hands. It makes you someone who deserves to be happy. It makes you someone who has been through hell and came out the other side. It makes you someone I am absolutely in love with. She kissed him again, harder this time with less uncertainty. When they broke apart again, she said, You are sleeping in the house tonight, in a real bed. I will not hear any arguments about it, Deanna. You have slept on that floor for 2 months. 2 months, Quinn. That is enough, more than enough. You have proven whatever it was you needed to prove. I do not know if I was trying to prove anything. Then you have suffered enough for no reason at all. Either way, you are coming inside. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, and Quinn felt something inside him relax that he had not even realized was tense. All right, he said, but I am taking the spare room. We are going to do this properly. When people in town talk, and they will talk, I want them to have nothing real to say. Deanna laughed, and it was the first real laugh Quinn had heard from her. You are impossibly stubborn, you know that, I have been told. That night, Quinn slept in the small spare room off the kitchen. The bed was narrow and the mattress was lumpy, but it was heaven compared to the barn floor. He lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the house settling and thinking about the woman sleeping in the next room. Somewhere in the darkness, he heard Deanna moving around, and he wondered if she was having as much trouble sleeping as he was. In the morning, she made breakfast, and they ate together as the sun came up. The awkwardness Quinn had feared never materialized. Instead, everything felt natural, easy, like they had been doing this for years. After breakfast, they went about the day's work, but now there were small touches as they passed each other, brief moments of contact that said more than words could. November came with the first snow, just a dusting that melted by afternoon but promised harder weather to come. They worked together to prepare the ranch for winter, banking the house, making sure the cattle had shelter, laying in extra firewood. The physical work kept them busy, but the evenings were a different story. They took to sitting together after dinner, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. Quinn told her about his childhood in Missouri, about parents who died of cholera when he was 16, about the years of drifting from ranch to ranch with no real place to call home. Deanna told him about growing up in San Francisco, about parents who wanted her to marry a banker or a lawyer, about meeting Tom at a church social and running away to marry him despite her family's objections. "You regret it?" Quinn asked one night as they sat by the fire. "Running away with him?" Deanna was quiet for a moment. "No, Tom gave me 3 good years. He loved me the way I wanted to be loved. The fact that it ended too soon does not make it a mistake. I would rather have had those 3 years with him than a lifetime with someone I did not love. Your family. Did they ever forgive you? I do not know. I wrote them when Tom died, but I have not heard back. I think they would rather pretend I never existed than acknowledge that I made my own choices." She looked at Quinn. "What about you? Do you have anyone who would care if something happened to you?" "Not anymore. Tom was the closest thing I had to family in a long time, now." He reached over and took her hand. "Now I suppose I am hoping to build something new." She squeezed his hand. "I think we might manage that." December brought serious snow and temperatures that made working outside miserable. They spent more time in the house, and the close quarters forced a different kind of intimacy. Quinn was hyper-aware of Deanna at all times, the way she moved, the sound of her voice, the occasional brush of her hand against his. The tension between them built like a gathering storm. One night, as they were cleaning up after dinner, Deanna turned to him suddenly. "I want you to know that I am ready. For whatever comes next, I have done my mourning. I will always love Tom's memory, but I am ready to move forward, with you, if that is what you want." Quinn set down the plate he was holding. "It is what I want, more than anything, but I want to do this right. I want to marry you, Deanna, not just because it is the proper thing, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. But I know it has only been a few months since Tom died, and I do not want people in town to think badly of you. I do not care what people in town think, but I do. I care what they say about you. I care that you can hold your head up without hearing whispers behind your back. Give me until spring. Let me court you properly. Let enough time pass that no one can say we dishonored Tom's memory. Then marry me, and to hell with anyone who has something to say about it." Deanna looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Then she nodded. "Spring, but Quinn, I am holding you to that proposal. You do not get to change your mind." "I will not change my mind." "Good. Because I am already planning what I am going to wear." The winter was hard, but they weathered it together. The cattle survived with minimal losses. The horses Quinn had broken sold well in Elko, bringing in much-needed cash. They paid down the mortgage and even had enough left over to buy supplies and put a little aside for emergencies. The ranch that had seemed like a dying dream in August was now on solid footing. On Christmas Day, Quinn rode into Elko and came back with a small package wrapped in brown paper. He gave it to Deanna after dinner, suddenly nervous in a way he had not been since he was a boy. She unwrapped it carefully and found a simple gold ring with a small stone that caught the lamplight. "It is not much," Quinn said, "but I wanted you to have something. Consider it a promise." Deanna slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. "It is beautiful, thank you. You are supposed to wait until I officially ask." "You already asked. I am just making sure you do not back out." She kissed him then, and it was different from the other kisses they had shared. This one was a promise, a claim, a statement of intent. When they broke apart, both knew that they were truly committed now, that there was no going back even if they wanted to. January 1886 was brutal. Snow piled up in drifts taller than a man, and the wind howled down from the mountains like something alive and angry. They spent days at a time trapped inside the house, venturing out only to feed the animals and make sure nothing had frozen. The close quarters and forced intimacy pushed their relationship to new levels. They learned each other's habits, quirks, moods. Deanna discovered that Quinn was terrible at cards but had a beautiful singing voice that he would only use when he thought no one was listening. Quinn learned that Deanna could fix almost anything mechanical, that she had a wicked sense of humor, and that she had nightmares about Tom's death that left her shaking and crying in the darkness. On those nights, Quinn would sit outside her bedroom door, talking to her through the wood, his voice low and soothing until she calmed down enough to sleep again. He never tried to come in, never pushed for more than she was ready to give, and Deanna loved him more for that restraint than he could possibly know. February brought a brief warming trend that melted some of the snow and allowed them to get out and assess the damage from the winter. They lost a few head of cattle to the cold, but overall, the ranch had survived in good shape. Quinn spent the warmer days working on repairs and improvements, preparing for the spring work that would come soon enough. One afternoon, Deanna rode out to where Quinn was replacing boards on the barn wall. She sat on her horse watching him work for a while before she said, "I have been thinking about something." Quinn looked up. "What is that?" "The ranch. It was Tom's dream, and I have been trying to keep it alive because I felt like I owed it to him. But the truth is, I do not know if I want to spend the rest of my life out here. It is beautiful and the work is meaningful, but it is also lonely and hard, and I am not sure it is what I want." Quinn set down his hammer and walked over to her. "What do you want?" "I want to be happy. I want to build a life with you, wherever that life might be. If that is here on this ranch, then I will stay and I will love it because you are here. But if you wanted to sell this place and go somewhere else, start something new, I would do that too." "Where would we go?" Deanna shrugged. "Somewhere with more people, maybe Sacramento or Salt Lake City. Somewhere you could use your skills with horses, maybe train them or breed them instead of just breaking them to sell. Somewhere I could maybe teach or open a shop or do something other than fight this land every single day." Quinn thought about it. The ranch was Tom's dream, not his. He had stayed because Deanna needed help, had fallen in love with her in the process, but he had no particular attachment to this specific piece of land. "Let me think about it," he said. "We have time to decide. Spring is still weeks away, and we have a lot of work to do before we could sell even if we wanted to. But I am not opposed to the idea." Deanna smiled. "That is all I am asking. Just think about it. Think about what we want our life to look like, not what we think it should look like." March came with muddy trails and the first signs of green pushing up through the dead grass. The world was waking up after its long winter sleep, and Quinn felt the same thing happening inside him. He had spent so much of his life just existing, moving from job to job, never planning more than a month ahead. Now he found himself thinking about years, about decades, about growing old with the woman he loved. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Quinn said, "I have been thinking about what you said, about maybe selling the ranch and starting fresh somewhere else." Deanna looked up from the shirt she was mending. And I think you are right. This place was Tom's dream, and we have honored that. But our life, yours and mine, should be our own dream. If we sell the cattle and the horses and the land, we would have enough to start over somewhere new. Maybe buy a small place near a bigger town where we could breed and train horses. You could do whatever you wanted. We could build something that is ours, You would do that, give up ranching. I am not giving up anything. I am choosing something better. I am choosing a life with you, whatever shape that life takes. Deanna set down her mending and moved to sit beside him. I love you. I know I do not say it enough, but I do. I love you for everything you have done, for everything you are, for the man you chose to be when you could have just ridden away and left me to drown. I love you too, more than I knew I could love anyone. They sat together in the firelight, making plans, dreaming dreams, building a future out of words and hope and love. April arrived with warm winds and blue skies. They listed the ranch for sale through the land office in Elko and were surprised when a buyer emerged within 2 weeks. A man from California looking to expand his cattle operation made them a fair offer, enough to pay off the mortgage and leave them with a good stake to start their new life. The sale would be final in June, which gave them time to make arrangements. They decided on Sacramento, where Diana had family connections despite the estrangement, and where Quinn could find work with horses easily enough. It felt right, like they were choosing their path instead of having it chosen for them. On a warm evening in late April, with the scent of sage blowing in through the open windows, Quinn took Deanna's hand and led her outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and red. In the distance, the mountains still wore caps of snow, but here in the valley, everything was green and alive and possible. "Deanna Blake," Quinn said, dropping to one knee in the dust of the yard. "I know I already asked you once and you already said yes, but I want to do this properly. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and the person I build a life with? Will you take a chance on a former drifter who got lucky enough to find you?" Diana was crying, but she was smiling too. "Yes, 1,000 times yes, but only if you promise me one thing. Anything. Promise me you will never sleep on the barn floor again. Promise me you will let yourself be comfortable, that you will stop punishing yourself for things that are not your fault, that you will let yourself be happy." Quinn stood up and pulled her into his arms. "I promise. No more barn floors. Only comfortable beds with you in them. That is all I ask." They were married in Elko on a Saturday in May, with a handful of townspeople as witnesses. Diana wore a simple cream-colored dress that she had made herself, and Quinn wore a new suit that felt strange and confining after years in nothing but work clothes. The preacher who performed the ceremony was the same one who had buried Tom Blake, and if he had any opinions about the speed of Diana's remarriage, he kept them to himself. After the ceremony, they had a small celebration at the hotel restaurant, and then they went back to the ranch for their last few weeks there. The sale would close in early June, and they wanted to spend the remaining time making sure everything was in order for the new owner. On their wedding night, Deanna stood in the bedroom that had been hers alone for so long and watched Quinn move around the room with careful uncertainty. "You can relax," she said. "We are married now. You are allowed to be here. I know, it just feels strange. Good strange, but strange." She walked over to him and started unbuttoning his shirt. "Let me help you get used to it." What followed was tender and awkward and perfect. They learned each other slowly, carefully, with laughter and whispered encouragement, and a sense of rightness that made up for any lack of skill. Afterward, lying tangled together in sheets that smelled of lavender and sunshine, Deanna said, "Thank you. For what? For waiting. For doing things right. For caring enough about me to be patient." Quinn kissed her forehead. "Thank you for being worth waiting for." They spent their final weeks at the ranch packing up their belongings and saying goodbye to the life they had built there. It was bittersweet, leaving behind the place where they had fallen in love, but the future beckoned with promises of new adventures. On the day they left, Quinn walked through the barn one last time. He stood looking at the spot where he had spread his bedroll on the hard floor for 6 long months, night after night, choosing discomfort because it felt like the only way he could share Deanna's pain. It seemed like a lifetime ago, like something that had happened to different people. Deanna found him standing there, lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" "About how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was sleeping on this floor, convinced that I had to suffer to prove something. Now I am married to the most amazing woman I have ever met, and we are about to start a whole new life together. I am not sure I deserve any of it. You deserve all of it. You deserve happiness and comfort and love. You deserve a soft bed and a full stomach and someone who loves you exactly as you are. And you have all of that now, so no more looking back, only forward." Quinn took her hand, and they walked out of the barn together. The journey to Sacramento took 2 weeks by train and stagecoach. They marveled at the speed of the railroad, the changing landscape outside the windows, the sheer number of people moving through the stations. After months of isolation on the ranch, the crowds felt overwhelming and exciting in equal measure. Sacramento, in June of 1886, was a bustling city of nearly 30,000 people. The gold rush was long over, but the city had transformed itself into a commercial and agricultural center. The streets were crowded with wagons and horses, and the air smelled of smoke and the river and possibility. They found a small house to rent on the outskirts of town, with enough land for a few horses and a view of the Sierra Nevada in the distance. Quinn found work almost immediately with a man who bred horses for the army, and Diana got a job teaching at a small school that had just opened to serve the growing population. Their life settled into a new rhythm. Quinn worked with the horses, training them, gentling them, teaching them to be partners rather than just tools. Diana taught children their letters and numbers and watched them grow in confidence and ability. In the evenings, they came home to each other, to the house they were slowly making their own, to the life they were building together. In October, Diana told Quinn that she was pregnant. He was terrified and thrilled in equal measure, suddenly aware of how much he had to lose. They spent the winter preparing, buying a cradle, sewing tiny clothes, reading books about child rearing and arguing good-naturedly about names. Their son was born in April of 1887, a squalling red-faced creature with Quinn's dark hair and Diana's eyes. They named him Thomas, after the man whose death had brought them together, and Quinn held his son in his arms and cried like a child himself. Diana recovered quickly from the birth, and they fell into the chaos of new parenthood with varying degrees of success. Thomas was a demanding baby, colicky and fussy, and there were nights when they both stumbled around like zombies, too tired to think straight. But there were also moments of perfect joy, watching Thomas discover his hands, hearing his first laugh, seeing him grow and change day by day. 2 years later, their daughter was born, and they named her Rose because Diana loved roses, and because she came into the world quietly, easily, like she had been waiting politely for her turn. Rose was everything Thomas was not, calm and content, sleeping through the night almost from the beginning, smiling at everyone she met. Quinn's business grew steadily. His reputation for training horses that were smart and responsive spread through the region, and he had more work than he could handle. He hired 2 men to help him, both young and eager to learn, and found that he enjoyed teaching as much as Diana did. Diana continued teaching until Rose was born, then took a few years off to focus on the children. But she never stopped learning, reading everything she could get her hands on, engaging with the world in ways that Quinn found endlessly fascinating. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Quinn took Diana to a nice restaurant in downtown Sacramento. They ate good food and drank wine and talked about everything and nothing. Walking home under a sky full of stars, Deanna said, "Do you ever think about those first months? When you were sleeping on the barn floor and I was trying to figure out how to survive? Sometimes it feels like a dream now, like something that happened to other people. I never thanked you properly for that, for staying, for choosing me when you could have chosen anything else." Quinn stopped walking and turned to face her. "You thanked me by loving me, by building this life with me, by giving me Thomas and Rose and a reason to wake up every morning. You have given me everything that matters, Deanna. I am the one who should be thanking you. Then we are even. More than even. We are blessed." They walked the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other in the worst possible circumstances and turned it into something beautiful. Years passed. Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved books and horses in equal measure. Rose became a whirlwind of energy and mischief, always getting into things she should not, always making them laugh. Quinn's business continued to thrive, and Deanna eventually returned to teaching part-time, finding that she missed the work and the connection to the community. In 1892, Diana's parents reached out, a letter arriving out of nowhere after years of silence. They were getting old, they said, and they regretted the estrangement. They wanted to meet their grandchildren, to reconnect with the daughter they had lost to pride and stubbornness. Deanna cried when she read the letter, and Quinn held her while she decided what to do. In the end, they traveled to San Francisco, taking Thomas and Rose to meet the grandparents they had never known. It was awkward at first, decades of hurt feelings not easily overcome, but the children broke through the tension with their innocent enthusiasm. By the time they left, relationships had been mended if not fully healed. On the train ride home, Deanna leaned her head on Quinn's shoulder. "Thank you for encouraging me to go. I did not realize how much I needed that closure. Family is important, even when they make mistakes, even when it hurts. They are still family. You are very wise for someone who spent his youth drifting from ranch to ranch with no plan. I had a plan. It just took me a while to figure out what it was." In 1895, Deanna found herself pregnant again, a surprise at 34 years old. The pregnancy was harder than the first two, and Quinn worried constantly, but in December, their second daughter arrived healthy and strong. They named her Hope, because she represented everything good and unexpected in their life. Thomas was 8 by then, already showing signs of the man he would become, thoughtful and kind and steady. Rose was 6, bright and precocious, always asking questions that neither parent knew how to answer. And now Hope, completing their family in ways they had not known were incomplete. Quinn was 36, with silver starting to show in his dark hair and lines around his eyes from years of squinting in the sun. Deanna was 34, more beautiful to Quinn than she had been at 24, confidence and maturity adding depth to her features. They had built a life that neither could have imagined in those dark days after Tom Blake died. One evening, when Hope was a few months old and the other children were asleep, Quinn and Deanna sat on their porch watching the stars come out. The air was cool but not cold, and somewhere in the distance, one of Quinn's horses whinnied softly. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not come to Elko that day?" Deanna asked. "If you had heard about Tom and decided it was too far to travel, or that I would be fine on my own, all the time. And then I stop wondering because it hurts too much to imagine my life without you in it. I would have lost everything. The ranch, my dignity, probably my will to keep going. You saved me, Quinn. I do not think I ever properly expressed how much that means." Quinn took her hand. "You saved me too. I was drifting, going nowhere with no purpose and no future. You gave me a reason to stay in one place. You gave me a family and a home and a life worth living. We saved each other. I still think about you sleeping on that barn floor. 6 months. Even when I told you to stop, even when I offered you a comfortable bed, you just kept spreading that bedroll on the hard ground. I never understood why until much later. I am not sure I understood it myself at the time. I just knew that you were suffering and I could not make it better, so I wanted to suffer too. It was stupid and it wrecked my back, but it felt necessary. Deanna laughed softly. It was the most romantic, stupid thing anyone has ever done for me. Every night, I would lie in bed knowing you were out there on the hard floor, and I would feel guilty and angry and strangely cherished all at once. No one had ever cared about me like that. Tom loved me, but it was different. You loved me before you even knew me, before I gave you any reason to. I loved you because of who you were in that moment, strong and scared and determined to survive. I loved you because you did not give up even when giving up would have been easier. I loved you because I saw in you everything I wanted to be. They sat in silence for a while, holding hands, listening to the sounds of the night. Inside the house, Hope started to cry softly, and Deanna stood to go tend to her. Before she went inside, she leaned down and kissed Quinn. Thank you for being exactly who you are. For sleeping on barn floors and fixing fences and staying when you could have left. For giving me this life. Thank you for letting me. The years continued to roll past. Thomas grew tall and serious, studying law with the intention of becoming a lawyer. Rose became a teacher like her mother, passionate and dedicated. Hope was still young, but she showed signs of inheriting her father's way with animals, spending hours in the stables talking to the horses. Quinn and Deanna grew older together, their love deepening and evolving as the years passed. They had arguments, of course, disagreements about money and children and the thousand small decisions that make up a life. But they never stopped choosing each other, never stopped working to maintain what they had built. In 1905, when Quinn was 46 and Deanna was 44, they took a trip back to Nevada. The ranch they had left behind was still operating, the new owner having turned it into a successful cattle operation. They rode out to visit, curious to see what had become of the place that held so many memories. The house had been expanded and improved. The barn where Quinn had spent 6 months sleeping on the floor was now much larger, modern, with none of the character it had once possessed. Everything was different, yet somehow the same. The mountains still rose in the distance, and the sage still scented the air, and the wind still whispered across the grasslands. Standing in the yard where Quinn had proposed all those years ago, Deanna said, "Does it feel strange to be back?" "A little. It is like visiting a place from a dream. I know it happened, I have the memories, but it does not quite feel real anymore. I am glad we came, though. I needed to see it one more time to remember where we started. So much has happened since we left here. Sometimes I forget how far we have come." Quinn put his arm around her waist. "We have come a long way, and we have a long way still to go if we are lucky." "Are you happy, Quinn? Truly happy?" He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I am happier than I ever imagined possible. I wake up every morning next to the woman I love. I have 3 incredible children who somehow turned out better than either of us deserves. I have work I enjoy and a home I love and a life full of meaning. What more could I possibly want? Nothing. That is the right answer. Nothing at all." They stayed in Nevada for a week, reconnecting with a few people they had known in Elko, visiting Tom Blake's grave to pay their respects, and then they went home to Sacramento and the life that was waiting for them. The 20th century brought changes. Automobiles started appearing on the streets of Sacramento, strange, noisy contraptions that scared the horses. The airplane was invented, and Quinn and Diana took Thomas and Rose and hoped to see a flying exhibition, all of them staring in wonder at the machine that defied gravity. The world was speeding up, changing faster than Quinn could sometimes comprehend, but some things remained constant. The love between Quinn and Diana, tested by time and circumstances and the ordinary struggles of life, never wavered. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared history and mutual respect, and the knowledge that they had chosen each other and would keep choosing each other every day for the rest of their lives. In 1910, Thomas got married to a girl he had met at university, a smart, funny woman named Catherine who fit into the family like she had always been there. The wedding was large and joyful, and Quinn stood next to his son watching him make the same promises Quinn had made 23 years earlier to Diana. Rose married 2 years later, a teacher like herself, and they moved to Los Angeles to start their own school. Hope showed no interest in marriage, focused entirely on her work with horses, training them with the same patience and skill her father had taught her. On their 30th wedding anniversary, in 1916, Quinn and Diana took a trip to the coast. They spent a week in a small inn overlooking the Pacific, walking on the beach, talking about everything and nothing, simply being together without the distractions of daily life. One evening, walking along the shore as the sun set over the water, Diana said, "30 years. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like 30 minutes. Other days it feels like forever, but in the best possible way. Do you have any regrets?" Quinn thought about it. "None. Well, maybe one. I wish I had found you sooner. I wish we had more time. We have all the time we need. However long we get, it will be enough because we will have spent it together." They walked until the stars came out, and then they went back to the inn and held each other and marveled at the life they had built from the ruins of tragedy. Quinn and Diana grew old together with grace and humor. They watched their children build their own lives and families. Thomas became a successful lawyer in San Francisco with 3 children of his own. Rose's school in Los Angeles thrived, educating hundreds of children over the years. Hope took over Quinn's horse training business when he could no longer do the physical work, expanding it and earning a reputation that spread across California. In 1920, Diana was diagnosed with a heart condition that the doctors said would likely shorten her life. Quinn refused to accept it at first, dragging her to every specialist he could find, but eventually they both had to face reality. They had time, but not as much as they had hoped. They made the most of what they had. They traveled when Diana felt well enough, spent time with their children and grandchildren, sat on their porch watching sunsets, and talked about the incredible journey they had shared. Diana made Quinn promise that he would not fall apart after she was gone, that he would keep living, keep engaging with the world, keep being the man she had fallen in love with. Diana passed away in her sleep in November of 1922, with Quinn lying beside her holding her hand. She was 61 years old, and she had lived more fully in those years than many people manage in a much longer lifetime. The funeral was large, attended by former students and friends and family, all of them sharing stories about the woman who had touched their lives. Quinn grieved deeply, but he kept his promise. He continued to live, to engage with his children and grandchildren, to work with Hope at the stables when his body allowed it. He told stories about Diana to anyone who would listen, keeping her memory alive through words and laughter and love. On what would have been their 38th wedding anniversary, Quinn went to the cemetery where Diana was buried. He sat beside her grave and talked to her, telling her about Thomas's newest grandchild, about Rose's school winning an award, about Hope finally meeting someone who might convince her to marry. He told her that he missed her every single day, but that he was managing, that he was keeping his promise. "I still think about those first months," he said to the stone marker. "About sleeping on that barn floor night after night, too stubborn to take a comfortable bed. You thought I was crazy, and you were probably right. But it was the only thing I could think to do. You were in so much pain, and I could not fix it, so I just wanted to share it. I wanted you to know you were not alone." The wind whispered through the trees, and Quinn imagined it was Diana answering him, telling him that she had always known, that she had understood even when she did not understand, that his foolish romantic gesture had been exactly what she needed, even if neither of them realized it at the time. Quinn Tanner passed away in his sleep in 1926, 3 years after Diana. He was 67 years old, and he died in the house they had built together, surrounded by pictures of his wife and children and the life they had created. His final words, spoken to Hope, who was sitting beside his bed, were about Diana. "Tell your mother I am coming home," he said. "Tell her I love her and I will see her soon." Hope held her father's hand and cried and promised him she would pass along the message. At Quinn's funeral, Thomas stood to give the eulogy. He talked about his father's strength and kindness, his work ethic, and his love for his family. But mostly, he talked about the love story between Quinn and Diana, about how they had found each other in the darkest of times and built something beautiful from tragedy. "My father once told me," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion, "that the truest measure of love is not what you say in the good times, but what you do in the hard times." He showed that love every single day of his life. From the moment he walked into my mother's life, when she was drowning in grief and fear, he chose to stay. He chose to work himself to exhaustion fixing a ranch that was not his. He chose to sleep on a hard barn floor for 6 months because he thought it might somehow ease her suffering. He chose my mother, over and over again for nearly 40 years, and she chose him right back. That is the legacy he leaves us. Not the business he built or the money he made, but the example of what it means to truly love someone. To choose them, support them, suffer with them, and build a life with them no matter what obstacles appear. That is what my father taught us, and that is what we will carry forward. The service ended, and they buried Quinn Tanner next to his wife in the Sacramento cemetery. The headstone was simple, listing his name and dates and a single line that Hope had chosen. He chose love. Next to it, Diana's stone carried a matching inscription. She chose him back. In the years that followed, the story of Quinn and Diana became a family legend, passed down through generations. Their great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren heard about the cowboy who slept on a barn floor for 6 months, not because anyone asked him to, but because it was the only way he knew to show love to a woman drowning in grief. They heard about the widow who gave that cowboy a chance, who let him into her heart even though she had every reason to keep it closed. They heard about the life built from tragedy, the family created from loss, the love that sustained through decades and continues even beyond death. Thomas, Rose, and Hope all lived long lives, all of them shaped by the example their parents set. They passed down the lessons about choosing love, about staying when leaving would be easier, about building something beautiful from the broken pieces life sometimes hands you. They taught their own children about sacrifice and commitment, and the quiet heroism of simply showing up, day after day, for the people you love. The horse training business that Quinn started continued for 3 more generations, finally closing in the 1970s, when Hope's grandson decided to pursue a different career. The small house in Sacramento, where Quinn and Diana raised their family, still stands, now a historical landmark that people can tour, learning about the remarkable couple who lived there. But perhaps the truest legacy of Quinn and Deanna Tanner is not found in businesses or buildings or even in the many descendants they left behind. It is found in the story itself, in the example they set of what it means to love truly and completely. It is found in the image of a young cowboy spreading a bedroll on a hard barn floor, night after night, choosing discomfort because it felt like the only way to share the burden of someone he loved. It is found in the widow who saw that gesture for what it was and opened her heart to the possibility of loving again. It is found in two people who met in the worst possible circumstances, who had every reason to remain separate and guarded, but who instead chose to build something together. Who chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. Who chose love over safety, commitment over comfort, partnership over independence. And it is found in the knowledge that somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Quinn and Deanna are together again, laughing about barn floors and hard times, holding hands and watching over the family they created, the love they nurtured, and the legacy they left behind. A legacy that says that love, true love, is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It is about showing up. It is about staying. It is about choosing someone over and over again, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. That is the story of Quinn Tanner and Deanna Blake, the cowboy and the widow, two souls who found each other in the dust and heat of the Nevada desert in 1885 and built something that lasted far beyond their own lives. It is a story of sacrifice and commitment, of quiet heroism and everyday love. It is a story that began with 6 months on a hard barn floor and ended with a lifetime of happiness. And it is a story that reminds us all that the greatest love stories are not about perfection. They are about choice. About choosing to stay, choosing to love, choosing to build something beautiful even when the world seems determined to tear it down. They are about people who look at hardship and pain and fear and say, "I am not going anywhere. I am staying. I am here." That is what Quinn did for Deanna. That is what they did for each other. And that is what made their story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the generations as an example of what love can be when it is given freely, completely, and without reservation. In the end, after all the years and all the changes and all the lives that came after, the story remains the same. A cowboy slept on a bare floor for 6 months. She never asked him to, but he never stopped. And from that simple act of devotion grew a love that changed everything, that created a family, that built a legacy, and that continues to inspire long after both of them return to the dust from which we all came. That is the power of love. That is the power of choice. That is the power of staying when every rational voice says to go. And that is the story of Quinn and Deanna Tanner, two people who proved that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with love at first sight, but with a choice to show up, to stay, and to keep choosing each other no matter what comes. Their love was not perfect. Their life was not easy. But it was real, and it was beautiful, and it was exactly what both of them needed. And in the end, that is all any of us can hope for. To find someone who will sleep on a hard floor for us, not because we ask them to, but because they cannot imagine doing anything else. To find someone who will stay when staying is hard, who will choose us when choosing us costs them something, who will build a life with us from nothing but love and determination and hope. Quinn and Deanna found that in each other, and the world is better for it.